Gold is not gold stocks. Timber alert. Nah, you're going to be okay. I'll spoil it for you all. We're going to get into the inverted yield curve. I think it's like 3 times out in the past month or two. We're going to talk about recession and why it's already here. We're going to talk about big uranium news. We're also going to get into Ghislaine Maxwell and R. Kelly's sex trafficking sentencing. I thought it was interesting. Should your newsletter editor be rich? We'll ask the question. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about why. I am Gerardo Del Real. It's great to be back along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 176 of Bizarro World, which, as all of you know by now, is our weekly therapy session. Apologies for not getting to you last week. I was out in Chicago visiting family, and given the state of the markets and the world, we thought it best to give you all a week to process. But here we are. Mr. Hodge, how are you, sir?
I just couldn't bring myself to do it alone, Gerardo. I needed your positivity to help us through.
Well, let's get into the negativity, right? The positive. It's our mentor always says he's an optimist too, because I always joke that I tend to be optimistic despite my rants and sometimes my offensive language towards things that I'm passionate about on the negative side. But I do tend to try to be optimistic in the sense that I want to be accountable. I want to find solutions to things. I was taught very young by my father, never bring me a problem unless you have a solution to offer, even if it doesn't work. And so I kind of try to approach life in that manner and fashion. But let's get into some of the problems we're in a recession. Let's just get right into that, right? The inverted yield curve is screaming that we're in a recession. And if you don't know that by now, I think all you have to do is go to the grocery store and go look at the state of the world for 99% of the world. And it's pretty darn clear that inflation has really, really burned a hole in people's pockets, and now is burning a hole in the pockets of those that are having, and we were joking off air, first world problems, right? The wealth effect. Even the wealthy and the rich are starting to feel a slight tickle or pinch, nothing like what most of the world is feeling. And, for those of us that are feeling a slight pinch, we're very fortunate, and it's good to acknowledge that. But look, we're in a recession. The Atlanta Fed has said as much. We'll talk about what Bullard just got done saying a few hours ago and why I am optimistic for a fourth quarter rebound and a 2023 that I think is going to be historic and very, very profitable. But first, the recession. I just read your letter that you sent out to subscribers, Nick. I thought it was very well written. You were concise and precise, and I'd love for you to summarize what you told everybody.
Well, yeah, recession is here. And so the classic definition is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, along with maybe a slowdown in earnings and hiring and things like that. And those are already manifesting. So the Atlanta Fed has come out with their update last week. In fact, they'll have one out today after we get done recording this podcast, but saying that Q2 GDP is going to be negative, and that, of course, will mean 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Hiring has already slowed to an 18-month low, and you can feel it all around you. People are tightening their belts, and we haven't even gotten to corporate earnings yet, which I've been saying are going to be bad. So I was looking up the number the other day because I was writing a monthly issue to see what the S&P earnings growth was in Q2 2021, and it was nearly 90%, right? Because it was being compared to when everyone was locked down in their houses. And so to put that in comparison, this year for Q2, forecasts are for the S&P corporate earnings growth to be less than 5%, and they've been being reduced down. So a couple of months ago, it was nearly 6%, and then it was 5%, and they just keep going lower and lower, especially because, retailers, primarily, the Targets, the Walmarts of the world, have been drastically reducing guidance, which I was writing about a month ago. So a recession is here in very real terms, and it's created a cascading effect in the market, right? You mentioned the problems of the 1% or the first world problems. We can't make more money, just like people can't go out there and ask for a increase in wages, but what we can do is sell stock, right? Because we're the equity owning class, and so that begets more selling in the market, which is why I continue to believe that there is more pain ahead for the broader indices. And then you can really see that in gold, which you mentioned at the top of the podcast, right? Breaking down through the support we've been saying, gold's held in there all year. Gold's held in there all year. It's holding support at 1808 or 1810 or wherever it was, and then boom, right? It goes right down.
She had to sit down. She's been dancing all year.
it very fast. I mean, $20-$30 a day, right? And if you look at that chart, that's actually a scary one because you can really see how it could get to below 1700 very quickly, albeit. I think that would be briefly, if it does happen, sort of one of those washouts, right? But that's just like it was in sort of March 2020, dipped below like 1500 just for a couple of days. And so anyway, it's scary out there. People are selling everything that's not nailed down to get their hands on those dollars, which I should also mention, because they're at 20-year highs. You have to go back to the turn of the millennium to see a dollar index at 106 where it is now. And so everyone wants as many dollars as they can have to buy groceries for themselves and their kids. My wife sent me a picture today of a DiGiorno pizza at Walmart. One DiGiorno pizza, $10. And that's here in Eastern. Well, actually, that was in the Northern Idaho Walmart she was in today. So
and probably a smaller $10 DiGiorno pizza.
Right. Think of a pizza, what it costs in New York or LA at this point. I mean, it's absolutely nutso out there. And I guess I'll stop there. But yeah, we can talk about the next couple of quarters and like you mentioned, inflation potentially coming down. But that's the negative part of it for sure.
No, I think that's well said. I agree with you that there's likely more pain ahead, especially in the broader indices because of the comps, right? If you're going to go from 84, 85, 86%, to 4%, that's a noticeable differential, right? It's as some would say. And so let's get to whether or not. Well, let me rephrase that. I think this moment in time with the summer doldrums, with gold consolidating and breaking down a little bit, with very few bids and some very desperate ask in the market. I think this is a spectacular time to be a contrarian, but the catch is you have to be liquid enough to own any stock that you buy today for probably at least 3 quarters and maybe a year. And I think if you're able to do that and have conviction about what you're buying and why you're buying it, I think you'll look like a genius in a year and maybe even in 6 months. But also, you may look very foolish in a week or 2 weeks because that stock could drop another 20 or 30%. And again, it has nothing to do with the underlying fundamentals of the stock. It has a lot to do with overall market sentiment. And, market psychology is as important when fear is more prevalent than greed. But man, the greed part of my contrarian upbringing really, really likes the prices of some of these stocks. And we talked off air, Cucho Copper at 23 cents is an absolute gift, people. An absolute gift. And I could go on. There's a list of about 50 names that are on my radar that are getting very, very attractive. So yeah, dollar index at 106, 107. That's something we talked about before. That thesis took out a little bit longer to play out than I thought it would. I knew it would eventually because when everything gets, a little bit oversold, people rush into dollars. For a little bit, they rushed into gold. I actually think they'll continue to rush into gold, though it wouldn't surprise me to see gold dip to the low 1700s, high 1600, 1680, 1685, that level there. If you breach that, you made a very good case in your letter today for a quick drop down to the $1,500 level. And look, the last time that happened is when we got the coiled spring slingshot to new all-time highs shortly thereafter. So would that be the worst thing in the world? Probably not, unless you really need to sell gold. And if you really need to sell anything over the next couple of months, you probably want to do that sooner rather than later. And we've been preaching this for months. You've been preaching this and doing it in your personal accounts for months. I think maybe for the last 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, starting with you taking your money back from the fund managers that were, not outperforming. I'll be polite. And so look, it just really depends on your timeline right now, folks. Do you need money in the next 2 or 3 months? And do you have to sell stock in order to get there? If that's the case, I would just go ahead and raise it now and give yourself the tranquility to enjoy the rest of your summer. But if you don't need the money, if you don't need to sell stock and you're actually in a position to be able to add to some of your positions that are probably down 50%, 60% from, all-time highs or recent highs. Oh man, my contrarian heart smiles at the current scenario.
Tranquilo. Well, I guess the one thing I didn't mention was the commodities have sort of fallen off a cliff as well. I didn't mention copper, which has quickly gone from nearly $5 in March to well below $4 here in July, down something like a third from those March highs and 26% just in the past month alone. And that's one of the reasons the Cujo Coppers of the world have sold off like they have. We've been saying that gold stocks are not gold. Well, that holds true for copper stocks are not copper. It's sort of the same thing. So if you've got copper down a third, you've got copper stocks that are down by half, even the big ones, right? The Arrows of the world, for example. It's not been fun to own those. And at the same time, like you said, if you can have a time frame that goes out beyond 3, 6, 9 months, then it makes sense. I've got stink bids in, some of which are getting hit for some of those commodity related stocks. And what else did I want to mention? I guess I want to talk about Bitcoin just for 1 second. Back over $21,000 today. I was pecking away a little bit over the past week or so while you were gone. Like I say, want to get to that whole Bitcoin and can still see a future where Bitcoin plays a significant role in the financial system. So don't forget about your cryptos either, I guess is what I would say. But going back to commodities in general, that's the one thing that I failed to mention in the first part of the answer to the question you posed, is every single commodity in the CRB index is down over the past month, except for the lean hogs. That was sort of what I was writing about today. And so you name it. I mean, whether it's soft commodities like soybeans and sugar, or orange juice, or silver, or nickel, or aluminum. I mean, they're down across the board over the past month, and that's not giving people the warm and fuzzies about the market. And so the last time we recorded this podcast, we were saying that we were in the middle of a relief rally or a bear market rally, and that definitely continues to be the case. You've got the S&P not breaking out to higher highs, and so I was shorting tech stocks again today in my personal account, for example. And again, I just don't think we're out of the woods yet.
I think this is a perfect time to get to that question that I posed and that you actually posed for this week's topic list, which we scrambled to fill in 5 minutes before we get on here, everybody. Should your newsletter editor that's giving you advice be rich, right? Because let me just say one thing really quick. It's not getting easier out there to pick winning stocks, right? I had it wasn't a spat because it was just somebody saying my name like they say a lot of names, and I could care less about that person, wish that person all the best and all the reciprocity in the world. But, I had received a not too kind note from another fellow writer back when Almaden Minerals got its permit denied, right? This from a person that had never visited the project, never talked to the locals, never went down there, just had an issue to grind. And for whatever reason, felt attaching my name to his was something that was, worthwhile for him. And it isn't for me. So I'm not going to say his name, but, the bottom line is when that happened, it never feels good as somebody that's recommending stocks and somebody that still loves that deposit and loves that company and actually got a very favorable decision this past week, being given access to UNICEF and working together with UNICEF as a model project moving forward, which again speaks to the community service and the social license. And now there's a process to where I think they're going to be able to get that permit. But look, Rio 2, the reason I brought up the nameless gentleman, Rio 2 recently got his permit denied. I really like that company. I really like management, really like that asset. But I bring it up not to poke, just simply to say, even if you know what you're doing, and even if you're a competent stock picker and the fundamentals are great, permitting is not getting easier in countries around the world where traditionally it was getting, better for a time. And even in countries where it's been friendly in the past, it's getting harder. So I say all that to say, to answer the question, you answered it briefly for me because you're still buying certain things. So my answer to that question that you posed, Nick, is rich or not, there's way to make money in this market still if you identify that timeline. And if there's writers or advisors or people out there that are screaming, there's nothing to do and there's just nothing but money to lose right now, that to me is more of a red flag than whether or not my editor is rich. Now, I'll preface that by saying that, look, if he or she's been doing this for over 10 years and they haven't been able to figure out how to get rich, you probably shouldn't be listening to that person, right? Because you can be a new mechanic and not know what you're doing. But my God, after year 10, you better know how to change that fucking tire and you better know how to check my sensor, or I'm not coming to you for car advice anymore. And so the same with your newsletter editors, folks, and the people that advise you. If after several years of bull markets, bear markets, resource cycle peaks, resource cycle bottoms, if that person still hasn't figured out how to play those and make money for the long haul, then maybe you shouldn't be listening to them. So that would be my answer. Take it away, Mr. Hodge.
So a couple of things, I guess. One is it's been really easy to make money for a decade, right? And so when the entire market was going straight up from 2009 to 2022, anyone could have a letter and put advice out there and stocks would go up because all stocks were going up for that time period. And so what's changed over the past 10 years is, one, now everybody's got a microphone and a camera and can put out a letter or a product or a video or whatever it is. But the other thing you've seen is that I think the consumer's getting smarter. They're able to separate maybe a little bit the wheat from the chaff, and the cream is beginning to rise to the top as it relates to newsletter editors and the products that are successful. So let me pick on Agora first. A lot of their products, they have guru editors, right? Guys that are on TV on Shark Tank or guys who have written books. But what a lot of people don't know is that they aren't writing the letters week to week or month to month, and they may not necessarily be picking the stocks. There's a co-editor or some assistant editor that is doing that, right? And that person is a 9-to-5 salary person, may or may not be rich. I'm not going to throw a blanket over top of all the divisions over there. But just one thing to be cognizant of, right? It was much more about the marketing, coming up with marketing strategies than offering true investment strategies on the whole. Again, not all the divisions. And then what really set me down this path is I saw a podcast or a video from another publisher head addressing this question: should your editor be rich? And it's because he employs a lot of editors who aren't rich. So he felt defensive in the need to address this question. And his answer didn't make one lick of sense. His analogy was this. Think about,
Let me get my coffee ready.
Think about because you're going to spit it out. Think about if you go to the gym and you hire a personal trainer, he said, why is that person not a professional bodybuilder? Or why is that person not a professional athlete? But like the copy that comes out of that place where that publisher publishes, is completely a non sequitur, right? Because your personal trainer doesn't have to be a professional athlete or professional bodybuilder, but they do have to be in physical shape, right? Which would be the true analogy to make. And if that's the true analogy, then yes, your newsletter editor has to be wealthy, right? He doesn't have to be a professional money manager. We know some of those guys don't kill it all the time. He doesn't have to be a hedge fund manager, but he does have to be wealthy and have made a lot of money from investing, which newsletter editors at that company don't make. And so he made a wrong-headed analogy because his newsletter editors aren't rich. And so just a caveat emptor out there, right? And look, I was a 22-year-old kid once that was picking solar stocks. That was easy. Like you said, the mechanic starting out doesn't know shit. Well, I was the guy starting out in 2007, 2008 that didn't know shit. But I learned shit, right? I didn't just grovel around for 10 years and I'm still, whatever, driving the same car or making the same salary and just taking my yearly increases or whatever. No, I went out there and made millions of dollars in the stock market, right? And so if your newsletter hasn't done that, can't show you how he or she has done that, and isn't doing that for you, then certainly it's time to reevaluate. And like I say, a lot of products are going by the wayside here lately because investors and consumers are figuring it out. And just to twist the knife a little bit more, I'm completely proud of the refund rate that we have. It's among the lowest in the industry, I know, because I've seen other people's refund rates. And so keeping subscribers happy is one of the names of the game. And I think ours are thoroughly happy from the low amount of refunds that I see coming through.
And look, frankly, being able to deliver triple digit wins in this resource bear market, which make no mistake, we're in a resource bear market. It's going to prove very profitable for us. But if you can have a couple of critical elements, lithium, like you had, or a couple of Patriots, or if you were able to buy Nevada Sunrise Gold at 3 cents or 5 cents or even 10 cents here recently, to be able to do that in this market and also see a runway towards much higher prices once the overall markets do have, better sentiment attached to them, then you can feel comfortable in having a position that's down 50%. Most of my biggest wins at some point, including Patriot Battery Metals, where I wrote multiple checks and then watched the price drift lower, were down 50% at one point. Heck, it's down 50% from recent highs. Now, again, mind you, I started at 16 cents, worked all the way up to 450. It's down now to the 230, 235 level. I could care less because the shares I have, I don't plan on selling. I see the path towards 5, then 10, and in a better market, even $20 a share. And so the market and time is my friend because I can afford to add to that position if I choose to at prices that I think are an absolute gift at current levels. So that's different from someone that may have to sell shares of Patriot right now in order to meet, their monthly or weekly or even daily commitments. And so define your timeline. And yeah, back to the newsletter editor, whether they should be rich or not. If they've been doing it for more than 5 years, folks, they should at least be able to show some progress. And look, it doesn't even have to just be in the stock market. Pick an asset class, right? If it's Bitcoin, if it's crypto, if it's real estate. I mean, I don't want to toot our own horn too much, but we haven't just done it with stocks. Let's be absolutely clear. You've done it with publishing, Nick. You've done it with real estate. I've done it with real estate. I've done it with stocks. And so we just had one of the best bull markets across all asset classes in the history of the world. If a bull market in all asset classes, whether it's comic books, sex toys, posters, crypto, stocks, real estate, if you weren't able to make money in that market, let me tell you something, baby. You're not going to make money in any market because it's not going to get any easier here in the next couple of months.
Long Sex Toys is a great name for a podcast or a band.
Can we add it to Bizarro World? The Bizarro World Long Sex Toy podcast. You'd be a different kind of therapy session, I'll tell you that much. And speaking of sex toys, let's talk about Ghislaine Maxwell and R. Kelly. I'll be brief. Look, I don't think there is a lot to get to here. I think I have voiced my displeasure with the fact that in the case of Miss Maxwell, who just was sentenced to 20 years for child sex trafficking, I know people who have served more than 20 years of prison time for engaging in conversations about drugs, right? It's called conspiracy. How you get 20 years, just 20 years, for child sex trafficking and also are allowed to get off without cooperating, given the names of anybody that was involved. And again, everybody knows how I feel about informants that are allowed to commit crimes and informants that are given, the green light by our government with taxpayer dollars, like yours truly, to go and cause chaos to further a government cause. I hate informants that are that kind, the not accountable kind. But as it relates to anything having to do with sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, pedophilia, give them the deal that you need to give them to go get the other 100 or 50 or 30 or 20 people that were involved. In this case, we all know that because of the wealth and stature of a lot of the people that were involved, there wasn't a lot of pressing. And speaking of pressing, the press is guilty for not being more outraged. There's outrage about everything. I hear Tucker Carlson's stupid ass on TV every day. He's mad right now because he thinks the reason that males are shooting shit up like they did in Highland Park and like they did in Uvalde is because women aren't pandering enough to the males and they got these bottled up frustrations.
Oh, the incel.
Boom, 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 boom. Let's kill everybody because my wife won't talk to me nicely or my girlfriend won't talk to me nicely. Are you fucking serious, Tucker Carlson? What is wrong with you and the people that listen to these people? I digress. But back to the thing with Ghislaine Maxwell and R. Kelly. In both those cases, R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years.
More.
Let's
make a point that's more than she got for an international child sex ring with the highest ranking members of society.
And that was going to be the next point. And with R. Kelly, there were at least some names that were disclosed and other people that are released under investigation and other people that are going to be arrested for facilitating it. I don't understand how we allow ourselves as a country here in America, for those listening from abroad or somewhere else, we allow ourselves to be so outraged by what the media tells us we're supposed to be outraged about, like males not being catered to enough by women, and somehow being able to segue into saying that's, maybe a cause of why these young men have mental health issues and are, in Highland Park, which is 40 minutes from where I just came back from visiting family, shooting stuff up in broad daylight in the morning at a 4th of July parade with kids, grandparents, and parents. There's so much more to be angry about that's valid. This is insane to me. The lack of accountability, the lack of outrage, and frankly, the lack of pushing back by the media, which picks the craziest things to be outraged about and people that follow them, right?
Well, none dare call it conspiracy, Gerardo. I mean, there's a reason that the scapegoating is now nearly complete, right? They put that thing, the Ghislaine thing to bed very nicely, right? One person hung himself in a jail cell, and the other one is going to go quietly away, as you say, without giving up names, precisely because of who was involved there. And there's a couple of journalists that have done some great work, and there was one put out a great Twitter thread. I don't recall the gentleman's name, but I have to find it and put a link up about why, some of the reasons why, we may never learn the absolute truth. And they range from, the people being as connected as they were. We're talking here about prime ministers and princes of large countries, all the way to going back to your rant on informants, the fact that the law enforcement may have known about this and was using them as informants for some other things. And so, we may never know, but the fact that people aren't more outraged and it doesn't get more press is truly incredible. And again, I would point back to who is truly in charge, right? The insiders of the world. And then, you mentioned not having to give anyone else up. For many other crimes, you got to talk or you're offered a deal, right? And so I was just reading a story today about Oregon wildlife crimes, people who are trafficking in endangered species or endangered plants and things like that. And one of the new requirements in these cases is hours of community service, but the hours of community service are with a researcher, and you have to tell the researcher how you traffic the animals and the plants. We're doing this for animals and plants, but not for young women, right? Who were raped and trafficked over the course of years. And so, I mean, try to rectify that in your mind. I dare you, because you fucking can.
And then here in America, we're passing laws to not allow victims of sexual assault that end up being impregnated the opportunity to terminate the pregnancy, even if it's within the first couple of months. It's absolutely batshit crazy.
Even a 10-year-old I saw in the past week.
Just fucking heartbreaking and infuriating. And Tucker Carlson's main point, because I follow him, because it's good to see.
You gotta have a contrarian stream, sure.
His most important topic of the day, it's July the 7th, folks. You can look it up. I'm not making this stuff up. Is he's outraged at Nancy Pelosi's cleavage. Because how dare a 70-something-year-old woman, who I personally don't care much for, how dare she have cleavage or, tits that you can see with your eyes?
Well, he should show his balls. I'm sure they're nice and tan. You remember that?
We talked about that. You mentioned journalists that have done a great job on the Epstein case. The one for me that has been an absolute superstar and broke the case tenaciously is a Miami Herald reporter.
That's right.
Julie K. Brown. For those of you that are on social media, at JKB Journalist. Phenomenal writer. Just an absolute beast of a researcher. Tenacious, was ignored for years, and she's largely responsible for anybody being brought to justice and stopping this child sex trafficking ring that now 2 people have been held accountable for. She's got a new book. I'll plug it here just because she's done such amazing work. She should have a new book. It's called The Perversion of Justice. And it's the firsthand account and up close look at what it took for her to expose Epstein and his crimes. So look that up. Very worthwhile. She's a great follow on Twitter. She also does very, very, very good investigative research. So yeah, I got to shout out the good stuff out there too, not just the Tuckers of the world.
Sure. There was another one. I can't find it right now, but I will find it and I'll post it somewhere.
Let's talk about something that people should be more outraged about. The Highland Park shooter, 21-year-old, killed 6. Excuse me, I believe a 7th died. Dozens injured. I was in Chicago. Actually, was just outside of Chicago. I was in Poplar Grove, and this broke. And he was still on the loose, right? And he had ties to Rockford, Illinois, which is 10-minute drive from Poplar Grove, where I was at visiting family. And look, this is a gentleman. This is a guy. This is an asshole that had threatened to stab his own family members, and it was so serious that they had to hide all the knives. This is a guy that had made threats against partners in the past, girlfriends in the past. And somehow the dad still thought that it was a great idea to sponsor his ownership of firearms card, that he was stable enough. He wrote a letter endorsing that card because in Illinois, you need that endorsement in order to be able to go ahead and carry safely, right? And carry legally. And somehow, after, having to call law enforcement to report the domestic violence, which, by the way, researchers have done brilliant work on how people, especially males with domestic violence histories, tend to be disproportionately high in the amount of violent crimes that they commit with weapons of, the caliber of what this asshole used, which, again, was an assault rifle. And so I say all that to say you can set up all the red flags. Chicago's got, and Illinois has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. They still provide a legal pathway to have responsible gun ownership. But then we have the Indianas of the world next door where you can go buy 100 guns at a gun show without, showing an ID sometimes and drive right back to Chicago, an hour and a half later. And then you have fathers like this kid's father, and I'm not blaming him for the shooting, but there should be some accountability there on parents, friends, just like the Uvalde shooting. That kid had told several friends that he was threatening to shoot the school up. There were texts that were released that were saying, I wouldn't want to go to school, any school today. And it was serious enough for people and kids to say, I didn't want to go. We have to do a better job as just citizens on acting and reporting on some of this stuff and helping prevent some of this stuff. And there is no one solution, folks. We've talked about guns in this country. We've talked about owning them safely. We've talked about, the mental health crisis, the lack of emphasis on treating mental health. But we're really failing at the most basic level of everything right now, it seems like, whether it's the economy and inflation, whether it's immigration and the way we pursue that, whether it's criminal justice, and that's what it's becoming, criminal justice, or just the amount of mass shootings in America, which again, folks, is a uniquely American problem. Not shootings in general, but just the amount of mass shootings, the frequency that we have here. It's not even close. If I showed you a chart, you would wish that you owned the stock of frequency of mass shootings of America compared to any other country in the world. By far. If I showed you a chart and I said, hey, these are the stocks. These are the charts of the stocks. Which one do you want to own over the past 12 months? You would point at that chart every time, the chart of America and the frequency of mass shootings in America. As a society, we just got to care more, y'all. We have to be more empathetic. We have to be more thoughtful. And it's going to take everybody to make a dent. I don't want to be a person that, if I'm a responsible assault rifle owner, has to turn that in. But we can't keep doing the same thing. I feel like I'm saying the same thing every week because every time I go away for a week, there's a mass shooting.
Week in and week out, and then you have one shooting in Europe, and it gets more headlines than the 4 or 5 mass shootings that go down in the U.S. on a weekend or weekly basis, right? And that sort of points back to the Ghislaine thing we were just talking about, right? Watch what the press covers, and more importantly, what the press doesn't cover, to see what the narrative is that they're trying to feed you. So. Quick on Uvalde, the police chief has finally stepped down. Thank goodness. He was taking a leave of absence, I think, last time we were talking, and now he's resigned, said that he didn't know what he was in charge. And then I was reading yesterday that, we got the initial full report of what went down that day. And there was a police officer with a rifle who requested to shoot the guy before he went into the school and didn't get a response.
He had him locked in.
It didn't get a response, right? And yet you got a black guy running in Akron, Ohio that gets 60 bullets into his body, right? So it's not that they're unwilling to shoot. Lord knows the cops want to kill people.
With no gun in his hand. That kid, by the way.
Yeah.
Didn't have a weapon. He did have a weapon, but not in his hand, and it wasn't on his body.
It sounded like he shot from the car, so I'm not letting him off the hook by any means. What I'm saying is those cops pumped 60 bullets into him while in Texas they watched a guy walk into a school with a fucking assault rifle, right? Like, shoot that guy, right? I don't understand. Like, again, trying to rectify that in your brain. And then the other thing I was thinking about was just the tribalism and the dogma with which in tribalism with which people approach these topics, right? Like you say, there's no one solution, right? We've talked about some of the solutions, enhanced background checks for people under 21. This was, again, a young kid, like you say. And then you've got like people like Kamala who go and give a speech talking about banning assault weapons. Like, that's not going to fucking happen, Miss Harris. Like, let's have some middle ground here. Let's not try to be completely not juxtaposed, but on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. You're never going to come to the middle and actually solve things that way. And so I just think that sort of tribalism, dogmatic approach has to end. And I was going to talk about Wall Street silver, but it's not the time for that, because the same thing, I am going to talk about it because the same thing happens in the markets, right? You get people who are, and this sort of relates to newsletter editors being rich, who have to talk their book all the time, right? Like Schiff, gold's always going to the moon and Bitcoin's crashing, right? And look what happened to Mr. Schiff this week. Or you have things like Wall Street Bets, right? Who come out of the ether last year amid this whole meme stock thing, and it's silver to the moon, and all these memes about things. Well, you know what? Silver's down 25% since you started telling people to buy silver, right? So these people who are always dogmatic and who always have the same approach and who always talk their book, it's like, that's not the way to approach anything. Investments, life philosophy, worldview, solving problems. You have to be flexible and be able to change your mind when the facts merit it. And we're just at a point now where I don't see a lot of people doing that, no matter what it relates to.
Here's a cool headline. You want to hear it? Boris Johnson, who was forced to resign this week, and I believe this is another fourth turning event. I think it's the first of many to come, by the way. Politicians that are just completely finally forced to have some dignity and do what's best for their country, right? It took a lot for Mr. Johnson to do that. It took his whole staff basically quitting on him after infidelity scandals, after, finding out that one of his, top people was accused of sexually harassing a female colleague. He went on to promote him. Then he went on to lie about the fact that he knew about it. Then he admitted it, but said, well, hey, look, I've gotten away with everything else. So what does this guy do? He just resigned as UK Prime Minister, and he's going to join a crypto startup. I can't make it up, y'all.
Nice.
I can't make this stuff up. It's called Bizarro World for a reason. We're on episode, what is it, 175? 176? 176. I think we've taken maybe 3 or 4 off during the course of, the last 3-4 years or what have you. It gets odder and weirder and just crazier every fucking month. It's a bit tiring. It's somewhat amusing. It's a bit scary for those that aren't ready for what's coming, because I see a global reset of almost every institution out there. And you know what? It's probably a good thing, because the current ones are failing everybody but the very rich, who can still get away with running a international child sex trafficking ring and get less time than somebody with 10 grams of crack might get. It's a crazy, bizarre world out there, folks.
It's a clown show, man.
It's a clown show. Let's go back to the markets real quick. I've made no secret that I think in the next 3 to 6 months, I think lithium and uranium are going to be the place to be as far as the first sectors that are going to really start to outperform when market sentiment gets better. And I think in those specific sectors, it'll get better for the lithium and uranium names sooner, just because of the robust underlying fundamentals and how out of balance the supply demand fundamentals are. And I think the amount of headlines that are going to come from those sectors. But I've also made no secret of the fact that I think, the precious metal stocks, specifically gold, later on in the year will also start to break out. And I think the gold price breaks out. And everybody knows, I think new all-time highs are coming. And, eventually we'll have another historic run here in the not too distant future. But you had an interesting note there about, is lithium being replaced? And there was a keynote by Robert Friedland, who of course is no stranger to the battery metals and no strangers to massive discoveries and no stranger to getting ahead of a cycle really early in the cycle and getting very, very wealthy off of it. And so I wanted to let you kind of touch on that a bit, Nick, and I'd love to hear your take.
First, back to newsletter editors, right? I keep seeing these promotions about, lithium is dying. This battery is going to replace lithium. You got to buy now. And it's like, no, you got to sell that now. That's why you keep putting that out. But nothing's replacing lithium, at least for the next 10 to 15 years, right? You've got these gigafactories that have been built across the world, sunk costs in the high billions, if not trillions of dollars. Yep. And it's just the chemistry that we've got right now. Do we need new battery chemistries? Yes, as Mr. Friedland was saying in that keynote, but no way to get them perfected, tested, and the supply chains built to make any significant dent in displacing, lithium, nickel, cobalt batteries in the next 10 to 15 years. So I guess first, Benchmark Intelligence. Let me start there with their
phenomenal
the refuting of the Goldman Sachs report, the short report on lithium that was out a couple of weeks ago, and them just saying that's total bullshit, right? I mean, you're not gonna have supply come online, even if the PFSs and the PEAs say that it's coming. And this is what Robert Friedland was saying. We know this. It's just we got to keep saying it, right? Mines take years to come online. I mean, they take years to prove up, to de-risk, to get financed, and
to get permitted,
to get approved. Absolutely. And so you've got car companies now going upstream, right? Not necessarily owning or wanting to mine lithium, but Tesla's taken stakes in lithium producers, and now Ford has done the same in an Australian producer. And you're going to see absolutely more of that. He was saying in the talk that if these global car companies, Toyota, Volvo, Kia, Ford, GM, whatever, call up their battery manufacturer, Panasonic, Sony, whoever it is, and say, I want X amount of batteries, they say, okay, we'll keep that in mind. But really, if there's 10 car makers,
cool story, bro.
Yeah, if there's 10 automakers at the table, only 2 of them are getting their orders filled, right? And so that's pretty much it. I mean, the lithium price is up 400 or 500% in the past year. I mean, it's not going to come down any time soon. And I find myself looking at even the producers, not just the Patriot batteries, not just the critical elements, which you mentioned, Nevada Sunrise, which is on to a potential new discovery, but even the Alchems of the world and the Albemarles. I mean, these are stocks that are going to supply literally what is the new gasoline, right? And then I guess it's worth mentioning the penetration of battery electric vehicles so far. It's 1% of cars in the U.S., right? And so if you've got 220 some million cars or 250 million cars in the U.S. and less than 1% penetration so far, I was talking to my father-in-law about this, who was in town recently. It's people they don't understand. They don't think about this. Where is that lithium going to come from? And it's not from recycling, and it's not we're going to replace the battery. It's the mines that you and I and our subscribers own, and the companies that are discovering and exploring for that lithium now. I mean, that's pretty freaking clear to me that we're the lithium barons of the 21st century.
I'm very proud of us, Nick. Oh, free name for everybody out there, Lithium Americas, which is right in that sweet spot, right in between, becoming a producing major. I think that'll happen soon. And, still not being there and rightfully so, not priced as one of those. But the recent pullback there That's another gift for all of you out there. But I was going to say, I'm really proud of us. We took a week off. We're back. We're refreshed. We're busy, but we managed to get long sex toys, and not just one, but 2 penetrations into the podcast. And I can't think of a better way to end it than with long sex toys and 2 penetrations. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I won't even look at the list. I'm sure there's plenty more to talk about. Actually, I do want to mention just one thing. I'm sorry. I'll see if I can work the sex toys back into it. But
and the penetration.
Do you remember Jason Ravnsborg, the attorney general from South Dakota? Do you remember the story from 2 years ago?
The guy that hit the guy and that guy?
And said it was a deer, but the guy's glasses were like on the front seat of his car, and he called
windshield
his
was busted, and
yeah.
The guy's ID was like in his wallet. I made up that part, guys, but
no, that was
pretty damn close.
But the guy's flashlight was still on the side of the road, lit up, and he said like he didn't see anything, he didn't know anything, and that guy finally got kicked out of office formally. He got impeached, and that was a bipartisan thing. The lead investigator, the guy who was taking his case as prosecutor, said we've seen better lies from 5-year-olds, right? And he was able to drag this on for 2 years. The guy's glasses were on his front seat, and he said he didn't know he hit a person. And so anyway, the truth has come out, and he was obviously texting on the phone right before he hit the guy. He was coming back from a late night fundraising event. Wink, wink. You can only imagine what that means, right? The imbibing that is involved with those sort of things. And so anyway, he was brought up on charges. He was kicked out of office. But one of the interesting things was is the Good Old Boy Network is just getting blown up in South Dakota, right? You can imagine what sort of Good Old Boy Network exists there. And Good Old Girl Network, I should say, because the governor is Kristi Noem, who has presidential ambitions in the next cycle, right? So this guy didn't go down without a fight, right? He started throwing shit like a monkey. And we learned all sorts of things about South Dakota, about how the governor was using her office to get her kids real estate licenses that they didn't pass the tests for, and all sorts of stuff, right? And now the governor is on the ropes defending herself and her actions, right? And so I just thought that was a brilliant pulling back of the curtain of how these people are in office to enrich themselves, use their office to protect themselves and their families, and aren't really doing much for you, whether that's helping shrink the wealth gap or improving upward mobility or prosecuting people who rape your daughters. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Think about that, folks. In America, which prides itself, right? And it's still a great country. It's still chock full of, opportunity. But in America, that prides itself on law and order and, acknowledging and respecting the right to life. It takes 2 years for a person that was ran over by an elected official that had his glasses inside the vehicle, broken windshield. And, anybody that looked for 1 minute could have seen the guy was texting right around the time that this accident happened. It took 2 years, not for that person to receive justice, just for that person to be pushed out of office so he can't continue to pass law in America. That's the state of corruption in the United States of America in 2022. Mind you, charges have not been brought up or stuck. There still has been no justice for that person. And man, do I wish that guy all the reciprocity in the world as well.
That's it. Sorry you didn't get to end on your joke. I'm sorry.
I'll reload for next week. We'll figure it out.
There you go.
It's great to be back, everybody. Needed this one. I am Gerardo Del Real along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 176 of Bizarro World. We'll see you next week, everybody. Promise to keep them coming.
See ya. Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.